And what's going on, everybody? Welcome back, Dave-Raves. And today is going to be a double feature. Hey, welcome to the one who's already watching. Shout out to you. We don't know that. If you are in chat, type in here. Alright, y'all. So, chapter 9. Oh, the last chapter, it was pretty much Snape being a dick. Nothing unusual about that. Thank you, guy in the chair, for joining my stream. Just turn it down a bit. Chapter 9, The Midnight Duel. Harry had never believed he would meet a boy he hated more than Dudley, but that was before he met Draco Malfoy. Still, first-year Gryffindors only had potions with the Slytherins, so they didn't have to put up with Malfoy much. Or at least they didn't until they spotted a notice pinned up in the Gryffindor common room that made them all groan. Flying lessons would be starting on Thursday, and Gryffindor and Slytherins would be learning together. Typical, said Harry darkly. Just what I've always wanted, to make a fool of myself on a broomstick in front of Malfoy. He had been looking forward to learning to fly more than anything else. You don't know, you'll make a fool of yourself, said Ron reasonably. Anyway, I know Malfoy's always going on about how good he is at Quidditch, but I bet that's all talk. Hey, shout out to the two up in the stream. Welcome in, welcome in. Appreciate you being in here. Malfoy certainly did talk about flying a lot. He complained loudly about first years never getting on the house Quidditch teams, and told long, boastful stories that almost always seemed to end with him narrowly escaping muggles and helicopters. He wasn't the only one, though. The way Seamus Finnegan told it, he'd spent most of his childhood zooming around the countryside on his broomstick. Even Ron would tell anyone who'd listen about the time he'd almost hit a hang glider on Charlie's old broom. Everyone from wizarding families talked about Quidditch constantly. Ron had already had a big argument with Dean Thomas. Hey, we got 3 open stream. Welcome in. Ron had already had a big argument with Dean Thomas, who shared a dormitory about soccer. Ron couldn't see what was exciting about a game with only one ball where no one was allowed to fly. Harry had caught Ron prodding Dean's poster of West Ham soccer team, trying to make the players move. Alright, chat, we're back. I'm just looking ugly. I don't want y'all seeing my ugly faces for maybe after I finish talking about soccer. Ron kind of see what was exciting to see a game with only one ball, where no one was allowed to fly. Harry had caught Ron prodding Dean's poster with the West Ham soccer team, trying to make the players move. Neville had never been on a broomstick in his life, because his grandmother had never let him near one. Privately, Harry felt she had a good reason, because Neville managed to have an extraordinary number of accidents, even with both feet on the ground. Sounds like me. Just saying. The amount of times I've hit my head at work, y'all, oh my god, like I've actually got indentation on my forehead or on my head of the AC. Just saying. Hermione Granger was almost as nervous about flying as Neville was. This was something you couldn't learn by heart out of a book. Not that she hadn't tried. At breakfast on Thursday, she bored them all stupid with flying tips she'd gotten out of a library book called Quidditch Through the Ages. Neville was hanging on to every word, desperate for anything that might help him hang on to his broomstick later. But everybody else was very pleased when Hermione's lecture was interrupted by the arrival of the mail. Harry hadn't had a single letter since Hagrid's note, something that the Malfoy had quickly been quick to notice, of course. Malfoy's evil owl was always bringing him packages of sweets from home, which he opened gloatingly at the Slytherin table. A barn owl brought Neville a small package from his grandmother. He opened it excitedly and showed them a glass ball the size of a large marble, which seemed to be full of white smoke. "So remember," he explained, "Gran knows I forget things. This tells you if you've forgotten something. This tells you if there's something you've forgotten to do. Look, you hold it tight like this. If it turns, his face fell because the remembrall had suddenly glowed scarlet. You've forgotten something." Now, in the films, it shows what he was forgetting. It was his robes. Neville was trying to remember what he'd forgotten when Draco Malfoy was passing the Gryffindor table. Who was passing the Gryffindor table, snatched the remembrall out of his hands. Harry and Ron jumped to their feet. They were half hoping for a reason to fight Malfoy, but Professor McGonagall, who could spot trouble quicker than any teacher in the school, was there in a flash. "What's going on?" "Malfoy's got my remembrall, Professor." "What's up, Clap? Welcome into the stream, buddy." Scowling, Malfoy quickly dropped the remembrall back on the table. "Just looking," and slipped away, grabbing Goyle behind him. At 3:30 that afternoon, Harry, Ron, and the other Gryffindors hurried down the front steps onto the grounds for their first flying lessons. It was a clear, breezy day, and the grass rippled under their feet as they marched down the sloping lawns toward a smooth, flat lawn on the opposite side of the grounds to the Forbidden Forest. These trees were swaying darkly in the distance. The Slytherins were already there, and so were 20 broomsticks lying in neat lines on the ground. Harry had heard Fred and George Weasley complain about school brooms, saying that some of them started to vibrate if you flew too high, or always flew slightly to the left. So that's why you should, go slightly more to the right. That way, when it goes slightly towards the left, you'll be in the position you want to be in. Just saying. Their teacher, Madam Hooch, arrived. She had short gray hair and yellow eyes like a hawk. "Well, what are y'all waiting for?" she barked. "Everyone stand by your broomstick. Come on, hurry up." Harry glanced down at his broom. It was old, and some of the twigs stuck out at odd angles. "Stick out your right hands over your broom," called Madame Hooch at the front, "and say, 'Up! Up!'" Everyone shouted. Harry's broom jumped into his hand at once, but it was one of the few that did. Hermione Granger's had simply rolled over on the ground. Neville's hadn't moved at all. Perhaps brooms, like horses, could tell when you were afraid, thought Harry. There was a quaver in Neville's voice that said only too clearly that he wanted to keep his feet on the ground. Madam Hooch then showed them how to mount their brooms without sliding off the end, and walked up and down the rows correcting their grips. Harry and Ron were delighted when she told Malfoy he'd been doing it wrong for years. "Now, when I blow my whistle, you kick off from the ground hard," said Madam Hooch. "Keep your broom steady, rise a few feet, and then come straight back down by leaning forward slightly. On my whistle. 3, 2. But Neville, nervous and jumpy and frightened of being left on the ground, pushed off hard before the whistle had even touched Madam Hooch's lips. "Come back, boy!" she shouted. But Neville was rising straight up like a cork shot out of a bottle. 12 feet, 20 feet. Harry saw him scared white face, looked down at the ground, falling away, saw him gasp, sliding sideways off the broom, man. Wham! A thud and a nasty crack, and Neville lay face down on the grass in a heap. His broomstick was still raising higher and higher, and started to drift lazily toward the forbidden forest and out of sight. Madame Hooch was bending over Neville, her face as white as his. Broken wrist, Harry heard her mutter. Yeah, my boy, it's all right. Up you get. She turned to the rest of the class. None of you is to move while I take this boy to the hospital wing. You leave those rooms right where they are, or you'll be out of Hogwarts before you can say Quidditch. Come on, dear. Neville, his face tear-streaked, clutching his wrist, hobbled off with Madame Hooch, and had her arm around him. No sooner were they out of earshot than Malfoy burst into laughter. Did you see his face? The great lump. The other Slytherins joined in. Shut up, Malfoy, snapped Pavarti Patil. Oh, sticky and put a long bottom, said Pansy Parkinson, a hard-faced Slytherin girl. Never thought you'd like fat little crybabies, Pavarti. Look, said Malfoy, darting forward and snatching something out of the grass. It's that stupid thing Longbottom's grand sent him. The room glinted in the sun as he held it up. Give that here, Malfoy, said Harry quietly. Sorry. Give that here, Malfoy, said Harry quietly. Everyone stopped talking to watch. Malfoy smiled nastily. I think I'll leave it for somewhere in Longbottom to find. How about up a tree? Give it here, Harry yelled. But Malfoy had leapt onto his broomstick and taken off. He had him blind. He could fly well. Covering level with the topmost branches of an oak, he called, Can I get up, Potter? Harry grabbed his broom. No, shouted Hermione Granger. Madame Hooch told us not to move. You'll get us all into trouble. Harry ignored her. Blood was pounding in his ears. He mounted the broom and kicked hard against the ground, and up he soared. Air rushed through his hair, and his robes whipped out behind him. And in a rush of fierce joy, he realized he found something he could do without being taught. It was easy. This was wonderful. He pulled his broomstick up a little to take it in even higher, and heard screams and gasps of girls back on the ground, and an admiring whoop from around. Whoop! He turned his broomstick sharply to face Malfoy in midair. Malfoy was stunned. Give it here, Harry called, or I'll knock you off that broom. Oh, yeah? Said Malfoy, trying to sneer, but looking worried. Harry knew, somehow, what to do. He leaned forward and grasped the broom tightly in both hands, and then shot toward Malfoy like a javelin. Malfoy only just got out of the way in time. Harry made a sharp about face and held the broom steady. A few people were clapping. No crab and Goyle up here to save your neck, Malfoy, Harry called. The same thought seemed to have struck Malfoy. Catch it if you can, then, he shouted, and he threw the glass ball high into the air and streaked back toward the ground. Harry saw, as on slow motion, the ball rise up in the air and then start to fall. He leaned forward and pointed his broom handle down. Next second, he was gathering speed in a steep dive, racing the ball. Wind whistled in his ears, mingled with the screams of people watching. He stretched out his hand. A foot from the ground, he caught it, just in time to pull his broom straight, and he toppled gently onto the grass with the remembrall clutched safely in his fist. Harry Potter! His heart sank faster than he just dived. Professor McGonagall was running toward them. He got to his feet, trembling. Never, in all my time at Hogwarts. Professor McGonagall was almost speechless with shock, and her glasses flashed furiously. How dare you! Might have broken your neck. It wasn't his fault, Professor. Be quiet, Miss Patil. What Malfoy? That's enough, Mr. Weasley. Potter, follow me now. Hey, should I let you open this room? Harry caught sight of Malfoy, Crabbe, and Goyle's triumphant faces as he left, walking nimbly in Professor McGonagall's wake as she strode toward the castle. He was going to be expelled. He just knew it. He wanted to say something to defend himself, but there seemed to be something wrong with his voice. Professor McGonagall was sweeping along without even looking at him. He had a jog to keep up. Now he'd done it. He hadn't even lasted 2 weeks. He'd be packing his bags in 10 minutes. What would the Dursleys say when he turned up on their doorstep? On the doorsteps. Up the front steps, up the marble staircase inside, and still Professor McGonagall didn't say a word to him. She wrenched open doors, and marched along corridors with Harry trotting miserably behind her. Maybe she's taking him to Dumbledore. He thought of Hagrid, expelled, but allowed to stay on as gamekeeper. Perhaps he could be Hagrid's assistant. His stomach twisted as he imagined it, watching Ron and the others becoming wizards while he stomped around the grounds carrying Hagrid's bag. Professor McGonagall stopped outside the classroom. She opened the door and poked her head inside. "Excuse me, Professor Flitwick. Could I borrow wood for a moment?" Wood, thought Harry, bewildered. Was wood a cane she was going to use on him? But wood turned out to be a person, a burly fifth-year boy who came out of Flitwick's class looking confused. "Follow me, you two," said Professor McGonagall, and they marched up on the corridor. Wood looking curiously at Harry. "In here." Professor McGonagall pointed them into a classroom that was empty except for Peeves, who was busy writing rude words on a blackboard. "Out, Peeves!" she barked. Peeves threw the chalk into a bin, which clanged loudly, and swooped out, cursing. Professor McGonagall slammed the door behind him and turned to face the two boys. "Potter, this is out of a wood. Wood, I'd found you a seeker?" Wood's expression changed from puzzlement to delight. "Are you serious, Professor?" "Absolutely," said Professor McGonagall crisply. "The boy's a natural. I've never seen anything like it. Was that your first time on a broomstick, Potter?" Harry nodded silently. He didn't have a clue what was going on, but he didn't seem to be being expelled, and some of the feelings started to come back to his legs. "He caught that thing in his hand after a 50-foot dive," Professor McGonagall told Wood. "Didn't even scratch himself. Charlie Weasley couldn't have done it." Wood was now looking as though all of his dreams had come true at once. "Ever seen a game of Quidditch, Potter?" he asked excitedly. "Wood's captain of the Gryffindor team," Professor McGonagall explained. "He's just a build for a seeker, too," said Wood, now walking around Harry and staring at him. "Light, speedy. We'll have to get him decent room, Professor. A number's 2,000, or exclusively 7, I'd say. I shall speak to Professor Dumbledore, see if we can't bend the first year rule. Heavens knows. We need a better team than last year. Flattened in their last match against Slytherin. I couldn't look Severus Snape in the face for weeks." There. Professor McGonagall peered sternly over her glasses at Harry. "I wanted to hear you're training hard, Potter, or I may change my mind about punishing you." Then she suddenly smiled. "Your father would have been proud," she said. "He was an excellent Quidditch player himself." You're joking. It was dinner time. Harry had just finished telling Ron what had happened when he left the ground with Professor McGonagall. Ron had a piece of steak and kidney pie halfway to his mouth, but he'd forgotten all about it. "Sika? But Perseus never! You must be the youngest house player in about a century," said Harry, shoving the pie into his face. Excuse me. He felt particularly hungry after the excitement of that afternoon. Wood told me. "Ron was so amazed, so impressed. He just sat and gaped at Harry. I start training next week, said Harry. Only don't tell anyone. Wood wants to keep it a secret. Fred and George and Nat Weasley now came into the hall, spotted Harry, and hurried over. Well done, said George in a low voice. Who told us? We're on the team too. Beaters. I tell you, we're going to win that Quidditch Cup this year for sure, said Fred. We haven't won since Charlie left. This year's team is going to be brilliant. You must be good, Harry. Wood was almost skipping when he told us. Anyway, we forgot to get off. We've got to go. Willie Jordan reckons he's had a new secret passageway out of school. There's that one behind the statue of Gregory the Smarmy that we found in our first week. See ya. Fred and George had hardly disappeared when someone far less welcome turned up. Malfoy, flanked by Crabbe and Goyle. Having a last meal, Potter? When are you getting the train back to the Muggles? You're a lot braver now that you're back on the ground and you've got your little friends with you, said Harry coolly. There was, of course, nothing at all little about Crabbe and Goyle, but as the high table was full of teachers, neither of them could do more than crack their knuckles and scowl. I'd take you on my own, said Malfoy. Tonight, if you want. Wizard stool, one only, no contact. What's the matter? Never heard of a wizard's stool before, I suppose. Of course he has, said Ron, wheeling around. I'm a second. Who's yours? Malfoy looked at Crabbe and Goyle, sizing them up. Crabbe, he said. Midnight, all right. We'll meet you in the trophy room. That's always unlocked. Malfoy had gone. Ron and Harry looked at each other. What is a wizard's duel? Said Harry. And what do you mean, you're my second? Well, a second's there to take over if you die. Ron said casually. Said Ron casually, getting started at last on his cold pie. Catching the look on Harry's face, he added quickly, but people only die in proper duels. You know, with real wizards. The most you and Malfoy will be able to do each other send sparks at each other. None of you know enough magic to do any real damage. I bet he expected you to refuse anyway. And what if I wave my wand and nothing happens? Throw it away and punch him on the nose, Ron suggested. Excuse me? They both looked up. It was Hermione Granger. Can't a person eat in peace around this place? Said Ron. Hermione ignored him and spoke to Harry. I couldn't help overhearing what you and Malfoy were saying. But you could. And you mustn't go wandering around school at night. Think of the points you'll lose Gryffindor if you're caught. And you're bound to be. It's really very selfish of you. And it's really none of your business, said Harry. Goodbye, said Ron. All the same, it wasn't what you'd call the perfect end to the day, Harry thought, as he lay awake much later listening to Dean and Seamus falling asleep. Neville wasn't back from the hospital wing. Ron had spent all evening giving him advice, such as, if he tries to curse you, you better dodge it, because I can't remember how to block them. Protego. There was a very good chance they were going to get caught by Filch or Mrs. Norris. And Harry thought he was pushing his luck, breaking another school rule today. On the other hand, Malfoy's sneering face kept looming up out of the darkness. This was his big chance to beat Malfoy face to face. He couldn't miss it. 11:30, Ron muttered. Alas, we better go. They pulled on their bathrobes, picked up their wands, and crept across the tower room, down a spiral staircase, and into the Gryffindor common room. Sorry, chat. Malfoy. They had almost reached the portrait of the hall when a voice spoke from the church near to them. I can't believe you're going to do this, Harry. A lamp flickered on. It was Hermione Granger, wearing a pink bathrobe and a frown. You, said Ron furiously, go back to bed. I almost told your brother, Hermione snapped. Percy, he's a prefect. He'd put a stop to this. Harry couldn't believe anyone would be so interfering. Come on, said Ron. He pushed open the portrait of the fat lady and climbed through the hole. Hermione wasn't going to give up that easily. She followed Ron through the portrait hall, hissing at them like an angry goose. Don't you care about Gryffindor? Do you only care about yourselves? I don't want Slytherin to win the House Cup, and you'll lose all the points I got from Professor McGonagall for knowing switching spells. Go away. All right, I warned you. You just remember what I said when you're on the train home tomorrow. So, but what they were, they didn't find out. Hermione had turned to the portrait of the fat lady to go back inside and found herself facing an empty painting. The fat lady had gone on a nighttime visit, and Hermione was locked out of Gryffindor Tower. Now what am I going to do? She asked shrilly. That's your problem, said Ron. We've got to go. We're going to be late. They hadn't even reached the end of the corridor when Hermione caught up with them. I'm coming with you. You are not. Do you think I'm going to stand out here and wait for Filch to catch me? If he finds all three of us, I'll tell them the truth. I'll try to stop you, and you can back me up. You've got some nerve, said Ron loudly. Shut up, both of you, said Harry sharply. I heard something. As they sort of snuffling. Mrs. Norris. Ron breathed Ron, squinting through the dark. It wasn't Mrs. Norris. It was Neville. He was curled up on the floor, fast asleep, but jerked suddenly awake as they crept nearer. Thank goodness you found me. I've been out here for hours. I couldn't remember the new password to get into bed. Keep your voice down, Neville. Password's pig snout, but it won't help you now. That fat lady's gone off somewhere. How's your arm? Said Harry. Fine, said Neville. Jonah. Madame Pomfrey mended it in about a minute. Good. Well, look, Neville. We've got to go somewhere. Be somewhere. We'll see you later. Don't leave me, said Neville, scrambling to his feet. I don't want to stay down here alone. The bloody Baron's been past twice already. Ron looked at his watch and then glared furiously at Hermione and Neville. If either of you just cook, I'll never rest until I've learned the curse of the bogies Quirrell taught us about, and used it on you. Ron opened her mouth, perhaps to tell Ron exactly how to use the curse of the bogies. But that would be something Hermione would totally do. But Harry hissed at her to be quiet and beckoned them all forward. They flitted along corridors, striped with bars of moonlight from the high windows. At every turn, Harry expected to run into Filch or Mrs. Norris, but they were lucky. They sped up a staircase to the third floor and tiptoed down the trophy room. Malfoy and Crabbe weren't there yet. The crystal trophy cases glimmered where the moonlight caught them. Cups, shield, plates, and statues went silver and gold in the darkness. They edged along the walls, keeping their eyes on doors at either end of the room. Harry took out his wand in case Malfoy leapt in and started at once. The minutes crept by. He's late. Maybe he's chickened out, Ron whispered. There was a noise in the room next to him made him jump. Harry had only just raised his wand when they heard someone speak, and it wasn't Malfoy. Sniff around me, sweet. They might be lurking in a corner. It was Filch, speaking to Mrs. Norris, horror-struck. Harry waved madly at the other three to follow him as quickly as possible. He scurried silently down the door, away from Filch's voice. Neville's Raves had barely whipped around the corner when they heard Filch entering the trophy room. They're in here somewhere, they heard him mutter. Probably hiding. This way, Harry mouthed to the others, and, petrified, they began to creep down a long gallery full of suits of armor. They could hear Filch getting nearer. Neville suddenly let out a frightened squeak and broke into a run. He tripped, grabbed Ron around the waist, and the pair of them toppled into a suit of armor. The clanging and crashing was enough to wake the whole castle. "Run!" Harry yelled, and the four of them sprinted down the gallery, not looking back to see whether Filch was following. They swung around the doorpost and galloped down one corridor then another, Harry in the lead, without any idea where they were or where they were heading. They ripped around a tapestry and found themselves in a hidden passageway. Hurtled along it, came out near the Charms Castle classroom, which they knew was miles from the trophy room. "I think we've lost him," Harry panted, leaning against the cold wall and wiping his forehead. Ned was bent double, wheezing and clutching. "I told you," Hermione gasped, clutching at the stitch in her chest. "I told you." "We've got to get back to Gryffindor Tower," said Ron, "quickly as possible." "Malfoy tricked you," Hermione said to Harry. "You realize that, don't you? He was never going to meet you. Filch knew someone was going to be in the trophy room. Malfoy must have tipped him off." Harry thought she was probably right, but wasn't going to tell her that. "Let's go." It wasn't going to be that simple. They hadn't gone more than a dozen paces when the doorknob rattled and something came shooting out of a classroom in front of them. It was Peeves. He caught sight of them and gave a squeal of delight. "Shut up, Peeves! You'll get us thrown out." Peeves cackled. "Wandering around at midnight? It goes for these. Tut, tut, tut. Naughty, naughty. You'll get caughty. Not if you don't give us away, please, please." "Should I should tell Filch? I should," said Peeves in a saintly voice, but his eyes glittered wickedly. "It's for your own good, you know." "Get out of the way," Ron snapped, taking a swipe at Peeves. This was a big mistake. "Students out of bed! Students out of bed down the Chimes corridor!" Ducking under Peeves, they ran for their lives, right to the end of the corridor where they slammed into a door, and it was locked. "This is it," Ron moaned as they pushed helplessly down the door. "We're done for. This is the end." They could hear footsteps. Filch running as fast as he could towards Peeves' shouts. "Oh, move over!" she snarled. Hermione snarled. She grabbed Harry's wand, tapped the lock, and whispered, "Alohomora." The lock clicked and the door swung open. They piled through it, shut it quickly, and pressed their ears against it, listening. "Which way did they go, Peeves?" Filch was saying. "Quick, tell me." "Say, please." "Don't mess with me, Peeves. Now where did they go?" "Shan't say nothing if you don't say please," said Peeves in his annoying sing-song voice. "All right, please." "Nothing." "Told you I wouldn't say nothing if you didn't say please." And they heard the sound of Peeves whooshing away and Filch cursing in rage. "He thinks the door is locked," Harry whispered. "I think we'll be okay." "Get off, Neville." For Neville had been tugging on the sleeve of Neville's bathrobe, or Harry's bathrobe, for the last minute. "What?" Harry turned around and saw quite literally what. Quite clearly what. For a moment, he was sure he'd walked into a nightmare. This was too much. On top of everything that had happened so far, they weren't in a room as he had hoped, as he had supposed. Lost my place. They are in a corridor. The forbidden corridor on the third floor is down. They knew why it was forbidden. They were looking straight into the eyes of a monstrous dog, a dog that filled the whole place, whole space between ceiling and floor. It had three heads, three pairs of rolling mad eyes, three noses, twitching and quivering in their direction, three drooling mouths, saliva hanging in slippery ropes from yellowish fangs. It was standing quite still, all six eyes staring at them, and Harry knew that the only reason they weren't already dead was that their sudden appearance had taken it by surprise, and it was quickly getting over that. There was no mistaking what those thunderous growls meant. Harry groped to the doorknob. 20 Filch in death? He take Filch. They fell backward. Harry slammed the door shut. They almost ran. And they ran. They almost flew back down the corridor. Filch must have hurried off to look after someone for them somewhere else. Because they didn't see him anywhere. But they hardly cared. All they wanted to do was put as much space as possible between them and that monster. They didn't stop running until they reached the portrait of the fat lady on the seventh floor. Where on earth have y'all been? She asked, looking at them bathrobes hanging off their shoulders and their flushed, sweaty faces. Never mind that. Pig snout, panted Harry, and the portrait swung forward. They scrambled into the common room and collapsed, trembling, into the armchairs. It was a while before any of them said anything. Neville, indeed, looked as if he'd never speak again. What do you think they're doing? Keeping a thing like that locked up in a school, said Ron. If any dog needs exercise, that one does. Hermione had gotten her both her breath and her bad temper back again. You don't use your eyes, any of you, do you? She snapped. Didn't you see what it was standing on? The floor? Harry suggested. I wasn't looking at its feet. I was too busy with its head. No, not the floor. It was standing on a trap door. It obviously was guarding something. She stood up, glaring at them. I hope you're pleased with yourselves. We could have all gotten killed, or worse, expelled. Now, if you don't mind, I'm going to bed. Ron stared after her, his mouth open. No, we don't mind, he said. You think we dragged her along, wouldn't you? But Hermione had given Harry something else to think about as he climbed into bed. The dog was guarding something. What had Hagrid said? Gringotts was the safest place in the world for something going to hide something? Except perhaps Hogwarts? It looked as though Harry had found out where the grubby little package from Vault 713 was. Whew. Alright, that video took me 38 minutes to read. That chapter did. Not too bad. I'm going to take a small, brief intermission of chat. Get a drink of water and, 420 real quick. Give me 2 minutes. Yeah. By the time we hit 40 minutes, I'll be back in reading All right, and we are back with chapter 10. All right. Yep, chapter 10. Halloween. Malfoy couldn't believe his eyes when he saw that Harry and Ron were still at Hogwarts the next day, looking tired but perfectly cheerful. Indeed, by the next morning, Harry and Ron thought that meeting the three-headed dog had been an excellent adventure. They were quite keen to have another one. In the meantime, Harry filled Ron in about the package that seemed to have been moved from Gringotts to Hogwarts, and they spent a lot of time wondering what could possibly need such heavy protection. It is already valuable or really dangerous, said Ron. Or both, said Harry. But as they all knew for sure, all they knew for sure about the mysterious object was that it was about 2 inches long. They didn't have much chance of guessing what it was without further clues. Neither Neville nor Hermione showed the slightest interest in what lay underneath the dog and the trapdoor. All Neville cared about was never going near that dog again. Hermione was now refusing to speak to Ron and Harry. Well, Harry and Ron, but the same difference. But she was just a bossy know-it-all that they saw as an added bonus. Sorry, strike that. Reverse it. Reread that out again. Line again. Hermione was now refusing to speak to Harry and Ron, but she was such a bossy know-it-all that they saw this as an added bonus. All they really wanted to know now was a way of getting back at Malfoy, and to their great delight, such a thing arrived in the mail about a week later. As the owls flooded into the Great Hall as usual, everyone's attention was caught at once by a long, thin package carried by 6 large screech owls. Harry was just as interested as everyone else to see what was in this large parcel, and was amazed when the owl soared down and dropped it in front of him, knocking his bacon down to the floor. They had hardly fluttered out of the way when another owl dropped a letter on the top of the parcel. Harry ripped open the letter first, which was lucky, because it said, "Do not open." It's from McGonagall, so I'll read it in her voice. "Do not open the parcel at the table. It contains your new Nimbus 2000. But I don't want everybody knowing you've got a broomstick, or they all want one. Oliver Wood will meet you tonight on the Quidditch field at 7 o'clock for your first meeting. For your first training session, Professor M. McGonagall." Harry had difficulty hiding his glee as he handed Ron the note to read. "A Nimbus 2000? Ron moaned enviously. "I've never even touched one." They left the hall quickly, longing to unwrap the broomstick in private before their first class. But halfway across the entrance hall, they found the way upstairs barred by Crabbe and Goyle. Malfoy seized a package from Harry and felt it. "That's a broomstick," he said, throwing it back to Harry with a mixture of jealousy and spite on his face. "You'll be in it for this time, Potter. First years aren't allowed then." Ron couldn't resist it. "It's not any broomstick," he told him. He said, "It's a Nimbus 2000. What did you say you've got at home, Malfoy? A Comet 260? Ron groaned at Harry. "Comets look flashy, but they're not in the same league as Nimbus." "What would you know about Weasley? You couldn't even afford half to handle," Malfoy snapped back. "I suppose you and your brothers have to save up twig by twig." Before Ron could answer, Professor Flitwick appeared at Malfoy's elbow. "Not arguing, I hope, boys?" he squeaked. "Potter's been sent to broom, Professor," said Malfoy quickly. Yes, that's right," said Professor Flitwick, beaming at Harry. "Professor McGonagall told me all about the special circumstances, Potter. And what model is it?" "A Nimbus 2000, sir," said Harry. Barney did not look at the look of horror on Malfoy's face. And it's really thanks to Malfoy here that I've got it, he added. Harry and Ron headed upstairs, smothering their laughter at Malfoy's obvious rage and confusion. Well, it's true. Harry chortled as they reached the top of the marble staircase. If he hadn't stolen Neville's Remembrall, I wouldn't have to be on the team. So I suppose that you think that's a reward for breaking the rules? Came an angry voice from just behind them. Hermione was stomping up the stairs, looking disapprovingly at the package in Harry's hand. I thought you weren't speaking to us, said Harry. But yes, don't stop now, said Ron. It's doing us so much good. Hermione marched away with her nose in the air. Kind of that. Harry had a lot of trouble keeping his mind on his lessons that day. He kept wandering up to the dormitory, where his new broomstick was lying under his bed, or straight off to the Quidditch field, where he was learning how to play that night. He bolted his dinner that evening without noticing what he was eating, and then rushed upstairs with Ron and wrapped the newest 2000 at last. Wow, Ron said as the broomstick rolled onto Harry's bedspread. I thought it was going to be a bedside. My bad. All right, we got two Russian bots on here. Sweet. Even Harry, who knew nothing about the different brooms, thought it looked wonderful. Slick and shiny, with a mahogany handle. It had a long tail of neat, straight twigs. Nimbus 2000 were in gold near the top. As 7 o'clock drew nearer, Harry left the castle and set off in the dusk toward the Quidditch field. He'd never been inside the stadium before. Hundreds of seats were raised in stands. Hundreds of seats were raised in stands around the field, so that spectators were high enough to see what was going on. At either end of the field were 3 golden poles with hoops on the end. It reminded Harry of the little plastic sticks muggles children blew bubbles through, except they were 50 feet high. Hang on, I'm gonna read, see how many pages we got left. I'm gonna count to see how many pages we got left. Check. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12, 13. All right. So about 13 pages. Too eager to fly again to wait for wood, Harry mounted his broomstick and kicked off from the ground. What a feeling! He swooped in and out of the goalpost and then sped up and down the field. The Nimbus 2000 turned whichever way he wanted at his slightest touch. Hey, Potter, come down. Oliver Wood had arrived. He was carrying a large wooden crate under his arm. Harry landed next to him. Very nice, said Wood, his eyes glinting. I see what Professor McGonagall meant. You ready, are natural? I'm just going to teach you the rules this evening. Then you'll be joining pre-team practice 3 times a week. He opened the crate. Inside were 4 different sized balls. Right? said Wood. Now, Quidditch is easy enough to understand, even if it's not too easy to play. There are 7 players on each side. 3 of them are called chasers. 3 chasers, Harry repeated, as Wood took out a bright red ball about the size of a soccer ball. This ball is called the quaffle, he said. Chasers throw the quaffle to each other and try to get it through one of those hoops to score a goal. 10 points every time the quaffle goes through one of those hoops. Follow me. The chasers throw the quaffle and put it in through the hoops to score, Harry decided. So that's sort of like basketball and broomsticks with 6 hoops, is it? What's basketball? Appreciate it, Amber. Never mind, said Harry quickly. It's good to know that basketball also exists in the UK. I didn't know. Now, there's another player on each side who's called the keeper. I'm keeper for Gryffindor. I have to fly around our hoops and stop the other team from scoring. 3 chasers, 1 keeper, said Harry, who was determined to remember it all. And they play with Quaffle. The Quaffle. Okay, got that. So, what are they for? He pointed at 3 balls left inside the box. I'll show you now, said Harry. So Wood. Take this. He handed Harry a small club, a bit like a short baseball bat. Wood, I'll show you what the bludgers do. Wood said, these 2 are bludgers. He showed Harry 2 identical balls, jet black and slightly smaller than the red quaffle. Harry noticed that they seemed to be straining to escape the straps holding them inside the box. Stand back, Wood warned Harry. He bent down and freed one of the bludgers. At once, the black ball rose high in the air and then pelted straight at Harry's face. Harry swung at the bat to stop it from breaking his nose and sent it zigzagging away into the air. It zoomed around their heads and then shot at Wood, who dived on top of it and managed to pin it to the ground. See? Wood panting, forcing the struggling bludger back into the crate and strapping it down safely. The bludgers rocket around, trying to knock players off their brooms. That's why you have 2 beaters on each team. The Weasley twins are ours. It's their job to protect their side from the bludgers and try to knock them toward the other side team. So, I think you've got all that. 3 tracers trying to score with the quaffle. The keeper guards the goalpost. The beaters keep the bludgers away from the team. Harry wrote off. Very good, said Wood. Have the bludgers ever killed anybody? Harry asked, hoping he sounded offhand. Never at Hogwarts. We've had a couple of broken jaws, but nothing worse than that. Now, the last member of the team is the Seeker. That's you. And you don't have to worry anything about the quaffle or the bludgers. Unless they crack my head open. Don't worry. The Weasleys are more than a match for the bludgers. I mean, they're like a pair of human bludgers themselves. They're not wrong. Wood reached into the crate and took out the 4th and final ball. Compared with the quaffle and the bludger, it was tiny, about the size of a large walnut. It was very bright gold. It was bright gold and had little fluttering silver wings. This, said Wood, is a golden snitch, and it has been the most important ball of the lot. It's very hard to catch because it's so fast and difficult to see. It's a Seeker's job to protect it, to catch it. You've got to. Yeah. Sorry, chat. My eyes are getting a little tired from all this reading. All right. Quaff will get it before the other team's Seeker because whichever Seeker catches Snitch wins his team an extra 150 points. So they nearly always win. That's why Seekers always get fouled so much. A game of Quidditch only ends when the Snitch gets caught. So it can go on for ages. I think the record is 3 months. They had to keep on bringing on substitutes so the players could get some sleep. Well, that's it. Any questions? Harry shook his head. He understand what he had to do all right. It was doing it that was going to be the problem. You won't practice with the snitch yet, said Wood, carefully shutting it back inside the crate. It's too dark. We might lose it. Let's try you with a few of these. He pulled out a golf ball of ordinary gloves out of his pocket. And a few minutes later, he and Harry were up in the air, with throwing the golf balls as hard as he could in every direction for Harry to catch. Harry didn't miss a single one, and Wood was delighted. After half an hour, they had really fallen, and they couldn't carry on. That Quidditch Cup will be ours. We'll have our name on it this year, he said Wood happily as they trudged back up the castle. I wouldn't be surprised if you turned out better than Charlie Weasley. He could have played for England if he hadn't gone off chasing dragons. Let's see, 1, 2, 8 more, y'all, 8 more. Perhaps it was because he is now so busy with Quidditch practice 3 evenings a week on top of all this homework. Crap shot. I gotta go use the restroom real quick. I'll be right back. I'm gonna leave a bookmark right at the part where I was at. Alright. I am so sorry, chat, but unfortunately, Mother Nature calls. Can't do nothing about it. Just another brief information real quickly. I'm sorry to interrupt the reading. Damn. Alright, chat, back in the room. Just 1 second. And we'll get back to reading. Ooh, nobody left in the stream. Oh well. I'm sorry I had to go potty, y'all. It happens. It's life. Perhaps it was because he's so busy with what with Quidditch practice, 3 evenings a week on top of all of his homework. But Harry could hardly believe it when he realized that he'd already been at Hogwarts 2 months. The castle felt more like home than Privet Drive had ever had. His lessons, too, were becoming more and more interesting now that they had mastered the basics. On Halloween morning, they woke up with the delicious smell of baking pumpkin wafting through the corridors. Even better, Professor Flitwick announced in Charms that he thought they were ready to start making objects fly, something that they had all been dying to try since they'd seen him make Neville's toad zoom around the classroom. Professor Flitwick put his class into pairs to practice. Harry's partner was Seamus Finnegan, which was a relief because Neville had been trying to catch his eye. Ron, however, was to be working with Hermione Granger. It was hard to tell whether Ron or Hermione was angrier about this. She hadn't spoken to either of them since the day Harry's broomstick had arrived. Well, that's what they wanted. Now, don't forget the nice wrist movement we've been practicing, squeaked Professor Flitwick, perched on top of his pile of books as usual. Swish and flick. Remember? Swish and flick. And saying the magic words properly is very important too. Never forget Wizard Buffer Baruffio, who said S instead of F and found himself on the floor with a buffalo on his chest. It was very difficult. Harry and Seamus switched and flicked, but the feather they were supposed to be saying skyward just lay on the desk. Seamus got so impatient that he prodded it with his swan and set fire to it. Harry had put it out with his hat. Ron at the next table wasn't having much more luck. Wingardium Leviosa! He shouted, waving his long arms like a windmill. You're saying it wrong. Harry heard Hermione snap. It's Wingardium Leviosa. Make the guard nice and long. You do it then, if you're so clever, Ron snarled. Hermione rolled up the sleeves of her gown, flicked her wand, and said, Wingardium Leviosa. Their feather rose off the desk and hovered about 4 feet above the heads. Oh, well done, cried Professor Flitwick, clapping. Everyone, see here. Miss Granger's done it. Ron was in a very bad mood by the end of the class. It's no wonder no one can stand her, he said to Harry as they pushed their way into the crowded corridor. She's a nightmare, honestly. Someone knocked into Harry as they hurried past him. It was Hermione. Harry caught a glimpse of her face and was startled to see that she was in tears. I think she heard you. So, said Ron. But he looked a bit uncomfortable. She must have noticed she's got no friends. Hey, welcome into stream. What's up, Soft? Appreciate you being up in here, my guy. Hermione didn't turn up for the next class and wasn't seen all afternoon. On their way down to the Great Hall for the Halloween feast, Harry and Ron overheard Parvati Patil telling her friend Lavender that Hermione was crying in the girls' bathroom and wanted to be left alone. Ron looked still more awkward at this, but a moment later they had entered the Great Hall. The Halloween decorations put Hermione out of their minds. 1,000 live bats fluttered from the walls and ceiling, while 1,000 more swooped over the tables in low, black clouds, making the candles and the pumpkins stir. The feast appeared suddenly on the golden plates, as it had on the first start of the term banquet. Yeah, actually, South, I'm going to do some Fortnite after I get done reading. Harry was just helping himself to a baked potato, and Professor Quirrell came sprinting into the hall. His turban askew and terror on his face. Everyone stared as he reached Professor Dumbledore's chair, slumped against the table, and gasped, "True! In the dungeons! Thought you didn't know." And then he sank into the floor in a dead faint. There was an uproar. It took several purple firecrackers exploding from the end of Professor Dumbledore's wand to bring silence. "Prefects," he rumbled, "lead your houses back to the dormitories immediately." Percy was in his element. "Follow me, stick together, first years. No need to fear the troll if you follow my orders. Stay close behind me now. Make way, first years coming through. Excuse me, I'm prefect." "How could a troll get in?" Harry asked as he climbed the stairs. "Don't ask me. We're supposed to be really stupid," said Ron. "Maybe Peeves let it in for a Halloween joke." They passed different groups of people hurrying in different directions as they jostled their way through a crowd of confused Hufflepuffs. "Yeah, I'm down." They passed their way groups in there. Harry suddenly grabbed Ron's arms. "I just thought, Hermione, what about her? She doesn't know about the troll." Ron bit his lip. "Oh, all right. Well, Percy better not see us." Ducking down, they joined the Hufflepuffs going the other way, slipped down a deserted side corridor, and not hurried off towards the girls' bathroom. They had just turned around the corner when they heard quick footsteps behind them. "Percy!" hissed Ron, pulling Harry behind a large stone griffin. Peering around it, however, they saw not Percy, but Snape. He crossed the corridor and disappeared from view. What's he doing? Why isn't he down in the dungeon with the rest of the teachers? Search me. Quietly as possible, they crept along the corridor after Snape's fading footsteps. "He's headed for the third floor," Harry said, but Ron held up his hand. "Can you smell something?" "I personally cannot. I can't have a sense of smell." Harry sniffed, and a foul stench reached his nostrils. A mixture of old socks and the kind of public toilet no one seems to clean. Achoo! Whew. Excuse me. Just thinking of how bad that troll smelled made me sneeze, chat. And then they heard it, a glow, grunting, and the shuffling footsteps of gigantic feet. Ron pointed. At the end of the passage to the left, something huge was moving toward them. They shrank into the shadows and watched it as it emerged into a patch of moonlight. It was a horrible sight. 12 feet tall, its skin was a dull granite gray, its great lumpy body like a boulder, with its small, bald head perched on top like a coconut. It had short legs, thick as tree trunks, with flat horny feet. The smell coming from it was incredible. It was holding a huge wooden club, which dragged along the floor because its arms were so long. The troll stopped next to a doorway and peered inside. It waggled its long ears, making up its tiny mind, then slouched slowly into the room. "The key's in the loft. We could lock it in." "Good idea," said Ron nervously. They edged toward the open door, mouths dry, praying the troll wasn't about to come out of it. With one great leap, Harry managed to grab the key, slam the door, and unlock it. Yes! Flushed with the victory, they started to run back up the stairs, up the passage. As they reached the corner, they heard something that made their hearts stop. A high, petrified scream, and it was something from the chamber they had just chained up. "Oh no!" said Ron, pale as a bloody baron. It's the girls' bathroom, Harry gasped. Hermione! It was the last thing they wanted to do, but what choice did they have? What? I mean, you could let her die, I'm just saying. Wheeling around, they sprinted back to the door and turned the key, fumbling in a panic. Harry pulled the door open and they ran inside. Hermione Granger was shrinking against the wall opposite, looking as if she was about to faint. The troll was advancing on her, knocking the sinks off walls as it went. Confuse it, Harry said desperately to Ron, and, seizing a tap, he threw it as hard as he could against the wall. The troll stopped a few feet from Hermione. It lumbered around, blinked stupidly to see what had made the noise. Its mean little eyes saw Harry. It hesitated, then made for him instead, lifting its club as it went. Hey, hey, Brain! Yelled Ron from the other side of the chamber, and threw a big metal pipe at it. The troll didn't even seem to notice the pipe hitting its shoulder, but heard the yell and paused again, trying to suddenly snap toward Ron instead, giving Harry time to run around it. Come on, run, run! Harry yelled at Hermione, trying to pull her toward the door, but she couldn't move. She stood flat against the wall, her mouth open in terror. The shouting and the chaos seemed to be driving the troll berserk. It roared again and started toward Ron. He was the nearest and had no way to escape. Harry then did something that was both very brave and very stupid. He took a great running jump and managed to fasten his arms on the troll's neck from behind. The troll couldn't feel Harry hanging there, but even a troll will notice if you stick a long bit of wood up its nose. And Harry's wand had still been in his hand when he jumped. They had gone straight up one of the troll's nostrils. Ew. Howling with pain, the troll twisted and flinched its club, with Harry clinging on for dear life. Any second, the troll was going to grab him or catch him off with a terrible blow with the club. Harry had sunk to the floor in fright. Ron pulled out his own wand, not knowing what else he was going to do. He heard himself cry the first spell that came to his head. Wingardium Leviosa! The club flew suddenly out of the troll's hand, rose high up in the air, turned slowly over, and dropped, with a sudden sickening crack onto its owner's head. The troll swayed on the spot and then fell flat on its face, with a thud that made the whole room tremble. Harry got to his feet. He was shaking out of breath. Ron was standing there with his hand still, his wand still raised, staring at what had been done. It was Hermione who spoke first. Is it dead? I don't think so, said Harry. I think it's just been knocked out. Harry bent down and pulled his wand out of the troll's nose. It was covered with a lumpy gray glue. Still. Ugh, troll boogers. He swiped it on the troll's trousers. A sudden slamming and loud footsteps made the three of them jump and look up. Or just look up, sorry. They hadn't realized what a racket they had been making. Of course, someone downstairs must have heard the crashes and the troll's roars. A moment later, Professor McGonagall had come bursting into the room, followed by Snape, with Quirrell bringing up the rear. Quirrell took one look at the troll, let a faint whimper, sat quickly down on a toilet, clutching his heart. Snape bent over the troll. Professor McGonagall was looking at Ron and Harry. Harry had never seen her look so angry. Her lips were white. Hopes of winning 50 points this time for Gryffindor faded quickly from Harry's mind. What on earth are you thinking of? Said Professor McGonagall. You're lucky you weren't killed. Why aren't you in your dormitory? Snape gave Harry a swift, piercing look. Harry looked at the floor. He wished Ron would put his wand away. He swished Ron with his wand down. There was a small voice that came out of nowhere. Please, Professor McGonagall. They were looking for me. Miss Granger? Hermione had managed to get to her feet at last. I went looking for the trouble because I thought I could deal with it on my own, because I've read all about them. Ron dropped his wand. Hermione Granger telling an outright lie to a teacher? If they hadn't found me, I'd be dead now. Harry stuck his wand. Huh. Alright, so if you guys look at that page right here, right when the quote ends, there is no quotation mark. Interesting. They hadn't found me, I'd be dead now. Quotation marks to end Hermione's statement. Harry snuck his wand up its nose. Oh, never mind. I take that back, Chet. I thought she was done talking. Harry stuck his wand up his nose and Ron knocked out with its own club. They didn't have time to come and fetch anyone. It was about to finish me off when they arrived. Harry and Ron tried to look as though this story wasn't news to them. Well, in that case, said Professor McGonagall, staring at the three of them. Miss Granger, you foolish girl. How could you think of tackling a mountain troll on your own? Hermione hung her head. Harry was speechless. Hermione was speechless. Harry was speechless. I'm sorry. Hermione was the last person to do anything against the rules, and here she was pretending she had to get them out of trouble. It was as if Snape had started handing out sweets. Miss Granger, 5 points will be taken from Gryffindor for this, said Professor McGonagall. I'm very disappointed in you. If you're not hurt at all, you'd better get off to Gryffindor Tower. Students are finishing their feasts in their houses. Hermione left. Professor McGonagall turned to Harry and Ron. Well, I still say you were lucky, but not many first years could take on a fully grown mountain troll. You each win Gryffindor 5 points. Professor Dumbledore would be informed of this. You may go. They hurried out of the chamber and didn't speak at all until they climbed 2 floors up. It was a relief to be away from the smell of the troll, quite apart from anything else. We should have gotten more than 10 points, Ron grumbled. 5, you mean, once she's taken off Hermione's. Good of her to get us out of trouble like that, really, Ron admitted. Mind you, we did save her. She might not have needed saving if we hadn't locked the thing in with her, Harry reminded him. They had reached the portrait of the fat lady. Pits now, they said and entered. The common room was packed and noisy. Everyone was eating the food that had been sent up. Hermione, however, stood alone by the door, waiting for them. There was a very embarrassed pause. Then, none of them looking at each other, they all said, thanks, and hurried off to get plates. But from that moment on, Hermione Granger became their friend. There are some things you can't share without ending up liking each other, and knocking out a 12-foot mountain troll is one of them. Whew! Alright, my ass is lightheaded as hell. I've been reading for a little over an hour, almost an hour and a half. If you don't count my little intermission and bathroom break real quick. It was like, 5 minutes total? So I've been reading for an hour and 15 minutes for the most part. That's it, though. That has been chapters 9 and 10. The next chapter will be chapter 11, titled Quidditch. But we'll read that next time. Maybe tomorrow, maybe the day after. We shall find out. I personally don't know myself. But hopefully you guys drop that like button. If you guys watch this afterwards, smash that like button, please. If you guys are new to the channel, smash that subscribe button. We're on the road to 1K. And come on, wouldn't it be nice to get paid for me reading? Just saying. If you'd like to donate to me, PayPal should be in the description. I'm not sure if it is or not, though. But yeah, until then, Daves-Raves out, and I'll see you guys on my Fortnite stream here in a little bit. Until next time, Daves-Raves out. Peace.